The air smelled of burnt sugar, pine needles, and desperation. It was a thick, cloying scent that coated the back of my throat, making it hard to swallow. The mating moon was supposed to be a celebration, a night where the moon goddess blessed her children with eternal halves. But to me, it felt like an execution. I stood at the very edge of the clearing, pressing my back against the rough bark of an ancient oak tree. I tried to make myself invisible. I was good at that. As an Omega, invisibility was my primary survival mechanism. If I was unseen, I couldn't be mocked. If I was unheard, I couldn't be ordered around. If I didn't exist, I couldn't be hurt. Around me, the pack was in a frenzy. The drums were beating a low, primal rhythm that vibrated through the soles of my worn-out sneakers and straight into my bones. She-wolves in silk dresses preened and giggled, their scents spiking with floral perfumes and arousal. The unmated males circled them, chests puffed out, radiating musk and aggression. It was intoxicating for everyone else. For me, it was suffocating. Just let the moon reach its zenith, I whispered to myself, wrapping my thin cardigan tighter around my chest. Let the ceremony end without a disaster. Let me go home alone. I didn't want a mate. A mate meant attention. A mate meant expectations I knew I couldn't meet. My wolf, usually a dormant, quiet thing deep in my subconscious, stirred uneasily. She whimpered, scratching at the back of my mind. She sensed something I didn't. The hair on my arms stood up, not from the chill of the autumn wind, but from a sudden, static charge in the air. The drums stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, almost violent. The alpha was approaching the dais, but my eyes didn't go to the alpha. They were dragged, against my will, to the figure standing to his right, Damon Blackwood, the future Alpha King. Even from across the clearing, his power washed over us like a tidal wave. He was terrifyingly beautiful, a predator carved from marble and shadow. He stood over 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the entire pack. His black hair was swept back, revealing a face that could stop a heart, sharp jawline, cruel lips, and eyes the color of molten gold. He looked bored, disinterested. He scanned the crowd of hopeful females with the look of a man shopping for a hunting hound, not a wife. And then he froze. The air shifted. The burnt sugar smell vanished, replaced instantly by an aroma so powerful, so delicious, my knees actually buckled. Cedar. Crisp, fresh cedar wood. And underneath it, the sharp, clean scent of rain just before a storm. My breath hitched. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. No. Please, goddess, no. Damon's head snapped toward me, across the sea of bodies, his golden eyes locked onto mine. The world tilted on its axis. The connection was instantaneous and violent. It wasn't a soft realization. It was a collision. A golden thread of pure energy erupted between us, pulling at my navel, dragging me toward him. My wolf howled, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that echoed in my skull. Mate. The word whispered through the crowd like a contagion. People turned. They looked at him, then followed his gaze to the shadows where I was hiding. The crowd parted, leaving a wide, empty path between the prince of the pack and the orphan Omega. He stepped off the dais. Every step he took was a hammer blow to my composure. He moved with a lethal grace, the crowd bowing their heads in submission as he passed. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the sheer potency of his aura. The scent of cedar and rain grew stronger, filling my lungs, drugging my senses. My body betrayed me. My skin flushed. My nipples hardened against the fabric of my dress. And a low, needy whine built in my throat. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. Up close, he was overwhelming. The heat radiating from his body was like a furnace. I looked up, trembling, meeting those golden eyes. I expected to see warmth. I expected to see the recognition that was burning through my own veins. Instead, I saw ice. His lip curled. It was a small movement, but it shattered me. He looked at my frayed cardigan. He looked at my scuffed sneakers. He looked at me not as a fated mate, but as a mistake. "You," he said. His voice was deep, a baritone that vibrated in the ground, but it held no affection. "You are the one the moon goddess chose?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears stinging my eyes. My wolf was scratching at the door, desperate to submit, desperate to be claimed. Damon laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. "Look at her," he addressed the crowd, gesturing to me with a dismissive wave of his hand. "An omega, a runt. She barely has enough magic to shift, let alone carry the next generation of alpha blood." The shame hit me harder than a physical blow. My face burned. The crowd remained silent, but I could feel their judgment, their pity. "Damon, please," I whispered, my voice cracking. The bond was pulsing, demanding completion. It hurt to be this close to him and not touch him. I feel it too." "You feel what I allow you to feel," he sneered, leaning down. His breath ghosted over my ear, smelling of mint and that addictive rain. For a second, I thought he might kiss me. Then he pulled back, his face a mask of stone. "I will not weaken my bloodline," he announced, his voice booming across the clearing. "I will not tie my soul to a wolf that cannot withstand the weight of the crown." He took a breath, gathering his alpha command. The air pressure dropped. "I, Damon Blackwood, future alpha of the Silver Moon Pack." "No, stop. Don't say it." "Reject you, Elara Vance, as my mate and Luna." The pain was immediate and blinding. It felt like a physical snap deep in my chest. A rubber band pulled until it broke, whipping back and slicing through my heart. I gasped, clutching my chest, my legs giving out beneath me. I fell to my knees, the wet grass soaking through my thin tights. The cold mud seeped into my skin, a stark contrast to the burning agony in my veins. My wolf let out a high-pitched scream of agony in my mind and then went silent. Damon didn't even flinch. He looked down at me, his golden eyes dulling as the bond severed. The beautiful scent of cedar and rain soured instantly, turning into something rotting and metallic. "Get her out of my sight," he ordered his betas, turning his back on me. "She reeks of failure." I didn't wait for the guards. Scrambling to my feet, I ran. I ran blindly, tears blurring my vision, stumbling over roots and rocks. I ran until the sound of the drums faded, until the lights of the ceremony were just a distant blur. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the territory, near the old clinic. The sky opened up, rain pouring down in sheets, mimicking the storm inside me. I collapsed onto the steps of the clinic, shivering violently. The rejection sickness was already setting in. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. The world spun. The door opened. Old Martha, the pack healer, looked down at me. Her face softened from annoyance to pity in a heartbeat. "Child," she murmured, helping me inside. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and sage. A clean, sterile smell that did nothing to soothe the rotting hole in my chest. She laid me on the cot. I curled into a ball, my teeth chattering. "He rejected me, Martha. He rejected me in front of everyone." "I know, honey. News travels fast," she said softly, placing a cool hand on my forehead. "Let me check your vitals. Rejection can kill an omega if we aren't careful." She moved her scanner over my body. The machine beeped rhythmically, then let out a long, low tone. Martha frowned. She tapped the machine, resetting it. She scanned my abdomen again. The silence in the room grew heavy. The rain lashed against the window pane, sounding like pebbles being thrown against the glass. "What is it?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Am I dying?" Martha set the scanner down. Her hands were shaking. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a terrifying mixture of fear and awe. "Ilara," she whispered. "The bond, it's severed, yes, but something remains." "What do you mean?" I tried to sit up, but dizziness slammed me back down. She took my hand, squeezing it tight. "You aren't dying, child," she said, her voice trembling. "You're pregnant." Pregnant. The word hung in the sterile air of the clinic, heavier than the storm raging outside. It didn't feel like a blessing. It didn't feel like a miracle. In the Silver Moon Pack, for a rejected omega with no protection and no mate, that word was a death sentence. Martha's hand was still gripping mine, her skin dry and papery like old parchment. She looked at my stomach, then back at my face, her eyes filled with a terrifying understanding. "Damon doesn't know," she whispered, the statement more of a question. "He rejected me," I choked out, though bull. Metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, where I'd bitten the inside of my cheek to keep from screaming. "He severed the bond, Martha. If he finds out, he might claim the child," Martha said, though she didn't sound convinced. "But if Vanessa finds out," the name made my blood run cold. Vanessa, the high beta female Damon had been courting before the mating moon. She was cruel, calculating, and possessive. She had tormented me for years, simply for existing. If she knew I was carrying the alpha heir, the child she was desperate to give him, she wouldn't just kill the baby. She would make it a slow, agonizing spectacle. A sudden crash of thunder shook the clinic walls, rattling the glass jars on the shelves. "I have to go," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. I sat up, ignoring the way the room spun. "I have to leave the territory. Tonight." Martha didn't argue. She didn't tell me to wait for the Alpha's mercy. Instead, she moved to the cabinet, grabbing a handful of gauze, a bottle of antiseptic, and a small packet of dried venison. She shoved them into my hands. "Go," she urged, her voice trembling. "The storm will hide your scent for an hour, maybe 2. Head for the Roguelands. Cross the Black River. They don't patrol the far bank in this weather." I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. Goodbye felt final. And if I accepted the finality, I would crumble. I pushed open the clinic door, and the storm swallowed me whole. The wind was a living thing. It screamed through the trees, tearing at my clothes and whipping my hair across my face. The rain had turned to sleet, sharp, icy needles that stung my skin and froze on my eyelashes. I ran back to the dilapidated shack I called home on the outskirts of the Packlands. I didn't turn on the light. I couldn't risk it. Moving by memory in the pitch black, I found my old canvas backpack. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the zipper. I packed only what would keep me alive. A spare sweater, a lighter, the supplies Martha had given me. I hesitated over a small, faded photograph of my parents, the only thing I had left of them. I shoved it into my pocket, right against my heart. Protect the pup. The thought wasn't mine. It was my wolf. She was weak, battered by the rejection, currently curled into a ball of misery in the back of my mind. But her instinct was surging forward, overriding the pain. "Run," she commanded. "Run before the alpha comes." I slipped out the back window, dropping into the mud. The temperature was dropping rapidly. I could feel the cold seeping through the thin soles of my sneakers, numbing my toes. The mud sucked at my feet with every step, a heavy, wet weight trying to drag me down. Every shadow looked like a wolf. Every snap of a twig sounded like a beta guard. I kept my head down, sticking to the densest part of the forest. The scent of the storm, ozone, wet earth, and freezing rain was my only shield. It masked the terrified, sour scent of my own fear. I had to reach the river. It was the border between the Silver Moon territory and the lawless rogue lands. If I crossed it, I was a rogue. I would have no pack, no protection, and no rights. But I would be alive. A howl cut through the roar of the wind. My heart stopped. It stuttered in my chest, a chaotic, painful rhythm. That wasn't a distant howl. That was close, too close. I froze, pressing myself into a cluster of thorny bushes. The thorns tore at my jeans, scratching my skin, but I didn't flinch. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Scanning the tree line, I saw them, flashlights cutting through the sleet, shadows moving with unnatural speed. "Search the perimeter," a voice barked. I recognized it. Kyle, Damon's Gamma. The Alpha sensed a disturbance in the bond. He wants the perimeter secured. Damon sensed it. Even rejected, the severed ends of the bond were raw. My panic must have been leaking through the static. He didn't know what was wrong, but his alpha instincts were screaming that something was amiss. I couldn't stay here. I waited until the beams of light swept past my hiding spot. Then I bolted. I abandoned stealth for speed. I sprinted, my lungs heaving, the cold air burning my throat like swallowed glass. My legs screamed in protest, heavy with exhaustion, in the lingering effects of the rejection sickness. But I forced them to move. For him, I thought, my hand drifting to my flat stomach. For the baby. The sound of rushing water reached my ears, a low, thunderous roar that competed with the storm. The Black River. I burst through the final line of trees and skidded to a halt on the muddy bank. The river was swollen, a churning mass of black water and white foam. It was moving fast, carrying debris and logs that could crush a human body in seconds. I looked across to the other side. Freedom, the rogue lands. "There!" The shout came from behind me. I spun around. 30 yards away, a massive, gray wolf burst through the brush. "Kyle," he snarled, his lips pulling back to reveal razor-sharp teeth. He shifted mid-stride, his bones cracking and reshaping until he was a man again, naked and furious in the sleet. "Halt!" he roared, his voice carrying the weight of a command. "By order of the Alpha!" my body wanted to obey. The omega in me wanted to drop to the ground and bare my neck, but the mother in me screamed, "No!" I took a step backward. The mud of the riverbank crumbled under my heel. "Don't do it, Elara!" Kyle shouted, taking a step toward me. "The current will kill you." I looked at the freezing water. Then I looked back at the woods behind Kael. From the darkness of the trees, a second figure emerged. This one didn't shift. It was a wolf of monstrous proportions, its fur as black as the void between stars. It was larger than any wolf I had ever seen. It prowled forward, ignoring Kael, ignoring the storm. It looked at me, and I stopped breathing. Its eyes weren't the golden hue of Damon's human form. They were glowing, burning red, the color of blood, the color of an alpha who has lost control to his beast. He was looking right at me. The connection slammed into me, even across the distance. It wasn't the warm pull of the mate bond anymore. It was a terrifying, possessive gravity. He saw me. He knew. If he caught me, he would drag me back. He would lock me away, and Vanessa would find a way to end my pregnancy. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though the wind tore the words away. The black wolf snarled, a sound that vibrated in my marrow, and crouched to spring. I didn't hesitate. I turned and threw myself into the void. The freezing water hit me like a concrete wall. It knocked the air from my lungs and instantly numbed my limbs. I swirled into the blackness, the current grabbing me with icy fingers, dragging me down, 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 into the dark. The last thing I saw, before the water closed over my head, was the blur of a massive black shape diving from the bank after me. 5 years. It had been 5 years since the ice-cold grip of the Black River had swallowed me whole. And yet, I still woke up shivering some nights, the phantom sensation of freezing water filling my lungs. But today, the only thing filling my lungs was the rich, warm scent of yeast and caramelized sugar. "Mommy, look!" The small voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I wiped my flour-dusted hands on my apron and turned away from the industrial ovens. Leo was sitting on a stool in the corner of the kitchen, his legs swinging back and forth. He was small for a 5-year-old, a trait he had inherited from my Omega lineage, but the resemblance stopped there. He had messy, black hair that refused to be tamed, and eyes that were a startling, intelligent amber, a shade too bright to be brown, a shade too dull to be the golden wolf eyes of his father. "What is it, Bug?" I asked, walking over to him. He held up his favorite toy, a die-cast metal truck I'd bought him from the thrift store, or what used to be a truck. The cab was crushed flat, the metal twisted and mangled as if it had been run over by a steamroller. "It broke," Leo said, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. "I was just driving it on my knee, and it squished." My stomach dropped. I looked at his small, chubby hand. There wasn't a scratch on him. "Leo," I whispered, kneeling so I was eye level with him. I took his hand in mine. The heat radiating from his skin was unnatural. It wasn't the warmth of a fever. It was the intense, burning furnace of alpha metabolism. Even in the dead of winter, Leo never needed a coat. He ran hot, constantly burning energy, constantly restless. "You have to be gentle, remember?" I said, keeping my voice steady, though my pulse was racing. "We talked about this. You're stronger than other boys." "I was being gentle," he insisted, a low rumble vibrating in his small chest. It wasn't quite a growl, not yet, but to a human ear, it sounded like a grumpy hum. To my werewolf ears, it was the budding dominance of a predator. The toy is weak. I took the mangled metal from him and shoved it deep into my apron pocket. We'll get a new one, a stronger one. But you have to promise me, Leo. Gentle hands, especially at school, especially with other kids. I know, Mom, he huffed. Hopping off the stool, he landed with a heavy thud, heavier than a child his size should make. Can I go watch the street? Stay behind the glass, I ordered, smoothing his hair down. And don't glare at Mrs. Higgins' poodle again. It started it, he muttered, marching toward the front of the shop. I watched him go, a knot of anxiety tightening in my gut. Every day was a gamble. We were hiding in plain sight in a human city, hundreds of miles from the Silver Moon territory. I wore scent-masking patches every single day. Itchy, chemical-smelling stickers I placed over my scent glands to hide the smell of Omega. To the world, I was just Alara, the single mom who baked the best cinnamon rolls in the district. But Leo, I couldn't mask him. Not fully. His scent was still developing, smelling mostly of milk and soap. But underneath, there was the faint, spicy tang of forest wood. Cedar, just like his father. I returned to the dough, punching it down with more force than necessary. The rhythm was soothing. Fold, push, turn, fold, push, turn. The bakery was my sanctuary. It smelled of vanilla beans, warm bread, and safety. The walls were thick brick, blocking out the noise of the city. Here, we were safe. Damon believed I was dead. The pack believed the river took me. We were ghosts. Mom! Leo called from the front. It's raining! I glanced at the clock on the wall. 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes until closing. The sky outside the large plate glass window had turned a bruised purple, and rain was beginning to lash against the pavement. It reminded me of that night. The night I ran. Flip the sign to "Closed, Leo," I called out, wiping the flour from my forehead. We'll head home before it gets too bad. I untied my apron and hung it on the hook. I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion. It was the constant vigilance. It drained me more than the physical labor. Every time a police siren wailed, I flinched. Every time a large dog barked, I reached for Leo. I walked into the front of the shop to help Leo with his coat. The bakery was warm, lit by the soft glow of the display case lights. It was peaceful. And then, the atmosphere shattered. It happened before the door even opened. The air pressure in the room dropped instantly, popping my ears. The fine hairs on my arms stood straight up, prickling with an electric static that made my skin crawl. My wolf, who had been dormant and quiet for years, suddenly woke up. She let out a sharp, warning snarl in the back of my head. Hide! The brass bell above the door chimed. It was a cheerful, tinkling sound. But in the sudden, suffocating silence of the shop, it sounded like a funeral toll. The door opened. A gust of wind blew in, carrying the scent of the storm. But underneath the smell of wet asphalt and city exhaust, there was something else. A scent so powerful, so deeply ingrained in my DNA, that my vision actually blurred for a second. Cedar, sharp, commanding cedar wood, and rain, the smell of a storm just before the lightning strikes. I froze. My feet were rooted to the linoleum floor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. A man stepped into the bakery. He was huge. He had to duck slightly to clear the doorframe. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than this entire building. The expensive fabric straining across broad, muscular shoulders. He shook a black umbrella and collapsed it with a sharp snap. He turned. 5 years had hardened him. The boy who had rejected me was gone. In his place stood a king. His jaw was sharper, covered in a shadow of stubble. There were fine lines around his eyes that were currently hidden behind dark sunglasses. But I knew the color. I saw that molten gold in my nightmares every single week. Damon Blackwood. He took a deep breath, his nostrils flaring slightly as he inhaled the air of the shop. I stopped breathing entirely. I was wearing my blockers. I was standing downwind. I looked different. My hair was shorter, my clothes were human, my posture was slumped with exhaustion. He can't know. He can't know. We're closed, I tried to say. My voice came out as a strangled whisper. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and tried again, forcing my voice to be flat, dull, human. I'm sorry, sir. We're closed. Damon didn't leave. He took a step toward the counter. His movements were fluid, predatory. The energy radiating off him was suffocating. Pure, unadulterated alpha dominance. It pressed against my chest, demanding submission. It took everything I had not to drop to my knees and bare my neck. He took off his sunglasses. Those golden eyes swept over the display case, looking at the empty trays, before flicking up to meet mine. For a second, the world stopped. The sign says, "Open," he said. His voice, goddess, his voice. It was deeper, rougher, like gravel grinding over velvet. It vibrated in the floorboards, traveling up through the soles of my shoes. He didn't recognize me. The relief was so intense, it almost made me dizzy. He looked at me and saw a tired bakery worker. He didn't see the omega he had thrown away in the mud. I forgot to flip it, I lied, my hands gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. I was just about to lock up. Damon stared at me for a beat longer than was comfortable. His brow furrowed slightly, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't quite understand. He leaned in, resting his hands on the glass counter. I just need coffee, he said. It wasn't a request. It was a statement. Black, and whatever you have left that isn't stale. I should have kicked him out. I should have screamed. Instead, my body moved on autopilot, conditioned by years of pack hierarchy to obey a direct command from an alpha. Yes, I whispered. Just a moment. I turned my back to him to start the espresso machine, my hands trembling violently. I needed him gone. I needed to get Leo and run. Leo! My heart stopped. Where was Leo? I spun around, panic flaring in my chest. Leo was standing in the aisle, directly between me and Damon. He had frozen, his small body tense. He was staring up at the giant stranger in the suit. Damon had turned away from the counter and was looking down at the boy. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a terrifying tension. Leo didn't look away. He didn't cower. He didn't hide behind my legs like a human child would. He stood his ground, his small chin lifted, his amber eyes locked onto Damon's golden ones. Damon tilted his head, intrigued. He sensed it. He sensed the defiance. He crouched down, balancing effortlessly on the balls of his feet, so he was face to face with my son. "You're a brave little thing, aren't you?" Damon murmured, his voice surprisingly soft. Leo didn't speak, but then he did something that made my blood freeze in my veins. He flared his nostrils. He inhaled, smelling the alpha, and then a low, vibrating growl rumbled in his small throat. Damon's eyes widened. He froze. The scent of cedar and rain spiked in the air, aggressive and confused. Damon looked at the boy, really looked at him, and then slowly, his gaze lifted to me. He narrowed his eyes. He inhaled deeply, searching past the vanilla, past the yeast, past the scent blockers. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Who are you?" The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, like smoke in a burning room. Damon was still crouched, his expensive suit straining against his thighs, his golden eyes flicking between Leo's defiant glare and my pale face. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of the mate bond. I had to separate them. I had to get Leo away from him now. "Leo," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. It cracked like a whip in the silent bakery. "Back room, now." Leo blinked, the low growl dying in his throat. He looked at me, confused by my tone. I never raised my voice. "But Mom, go!" I pointed to the swinging doors of the kitchen. "Take your tablet. Do not come out until I tell you." The command in my voice was weak, purely human, but the fear underneath it must have registered with his wolf instincts. Leo looked at Damon one last time, a look of pure suspicion, and then scrambled off the stool. He ran to the back, the swinging doors whooshing shut behind him. I was alone with the Alpha King. Damon slowly straightened up. He rose to his full height, unfolding like a dark storm cloud. The air in the shop felt too thin, as if his sheer presence was consuming all the oxygen. He turned back to the counter. Thud, thud. The sound of his heavy combat boots on the hardwood floor echoed in the hollows of my chest. He didn't walk. He stalked. Every movement was calculated, lethal efficiency disguised as casual grace. He stopped at the counter, looming over me. The display case was the only thing separating us, a fragile barrier of glass and metal against a force of nature. "Your son," Damon said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the countertop and into my fingertips. "He has spirit. He watches too many monster movies." I lied quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush. "He thinks growling makes him tough," Damon hummed, a non-committal sound that vibrated deep in his chest. He didn't believe me. I could see it in the slight tilt of his head, the way his nostrils flared as he inhaled the air again. He was confused. The bond, that severed, ragged thing between us, was agitated. He could feel something, like a phantom limb itching, but my scent blockers were holding, for now. "Coffee," he said abruptly, his eyes narrowing as they bore into mine. "Black, 2 sugars." "Coming right up." I turned away, desperate to break eye contact. Being looked at by him felt like being touched. It was a physical sensation, a phantom caress that trailed down my spine and made my nipples ache against the fabric of my bra. I hated it. I hated him. He was the man who had discarded me like trash, who had driven me into a freezing river. But my body, my traitorous, instinct-driven body, didn't care about history. It only knew biology. It knew that the alpha behind me was strong, powerful, and mine. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Mate, mate, mate. drowning out the logical voice screaming, "Run!" I grabbed a paper cup, my hands trembling violently. I moved to the coffee pot. The dark liquid poured into the cup, the steam rising up to mix with the scent of cedar and rain that was now saturating the entire shop. "Just give him the coffee. Take the money. Get him out." I reached for the sugar container. My fingers were shaking so badly I couldn't grip the spoon properly. The metal clattered against the porcelain rim. Clink, clink, clink. A loud, telltale sign of my terror. I tried to scoop the sugar, but my hand jerked. White granules spilled everywhere. Over the counter, over the floor, coating my hand like snow. "Damn it!" I hissed, tears pricking my eyes. It was too much. The proximity, the fear, the smell of him. I was unraveling. "You're shaking!" His voice was right behind me. I gasped and spun around. He had moved. He had rounded the counter while I was distracted. He was standing in my workspace, in my sanctuary. He was 2 feet away. The heat coming off him was intoxicating. It was a dry, blistering heat that seemed to seep through my clothes and warm my frozen skin. I've had too much caffeine today," I stammered, backing up until my hips hit the stainless steel prep table. I was trapped. Damon took a step closer. He wasn't looking at the spilled sugar. He was looking at my face. He was studying me with an intensity that made my knees weak. He looked at the scar on my chin, from a fall when I was 6. He looked at the shape of my eyes. He looked at the pulse fluttering wildly in my throat. "What is your name?" he asked softly. It wasn't a demand this time. It was a plea. "Ellie," I lied, using the fake name I'd lived with for 5 years. "My name is Ellie." "Ellie?" He tested the word, rolling it around his mouth. He frowned. "You smell like nothing. Chemicals and vanilla." But underneath that, he leaned in. He was so close now. If he reached out, he could touch me. Underneath that, he whispered, "You feel like a ghost." My breath hitched. He was getting too close to the truth. The rejection bond was flaring up, responding to his proximity. My mark, the invisible scar on my soul, where he had torn himself away, was throbbing with a dull, aching pain. "Here," I said, shoving the coffee cup toward him, desperate to put something between us. "It's on the house. Please, just take it." He looked at the cup. Then he looked at my hand. I was still shaking. The tremors were uncontrollable now, vibrating up my arm. "Careful," he murmured. "You're going to drop it." Before I could pull away, he reached out, his large, warm hand wrapped around my wrist to steady the cup. The moment his skin touched mine, the world exploded. It wasn't a spark. It was a lightning strike. A shock wave of pure, undiluted energy surged from his fingertips into my veins, blowing out every fuse in my body. The scent blockers failed instantly against the direct current of the bond. The smell of chemicals and vanilla vanished. In its place, my true scent bloomed, wild and undeniable. Jasmine and honey. Damon froze, his hand tightened on my wrist, his grip bruising. The coffee cup fell from my numb fingers, hitting the floor with a wet splash, spraying hot liquid over our shoes. Neither of us moved. Damon's pupils dilated until his eyes were almost entirely black. The golden iris was swallowed by the beast. He inhaled sharply, dragging my scent deep into his lungs, looking like a man who had been drowning and just found air. "Jasmine," he rasped, his voice unrecognizable. He looked up, his gaze locking onto mine. The confusion was gone. The curiosity was gone. In their place was absolute, devastating shock. He pulled me closer, jerking me against his chest, staring at me as if he was seeing a resurrection. His hand moved up my arm, gripping my shoulder, as if to test that I was solid, that I was real. "Elara," he whispered, the name tearing out of his throat like a jagged stone. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't lie. The bond was singing, screaming, weeping between us. His face twisted in agony and disbelief. He shook his head slightly, his grip on me tightening to the point of pain. "You're dead," he choked out, his eyes searching mine frantically. "My scouts, they found your scent at the river. They said you died." "You're dead," he repeated, the words sounding foreign on his tongue, rough like gravel. "I buried an empty casket. I mourned you." The air in the bakery had turned solid. It pressed against my eardrums, silencing the hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of sirens outside, and the frantic thumping of my own heart. The only thing that existed was the heat of his hand clamped around my wrist, and the terrifying, golden intensity of his eyes. "Let go of me," I whispered. My voice was trembling, but I tried to inject a sliver of steel into it. I tried to summon the woman I had become over the last 5 years, the survivor, the mother, but in his grip, I was just Elara, the rejected, the Omega. "It is you," Damon breathed, ignoring my plea. He leaned closer, his nose grazing the sensitive skin of my wrist, where my pulse was fluttering like a trapped moth. He inhaled deeply, shuddering as the scent of jasmine and honey hit him. "Why? Why did you let me believe?" "You rejected me," I shouted, the sudden burst of anger giving me the strength to yank my arm back. To my surprise, his grip loosened just enough for me to stumble away. I crashed back against the prep table, putting the stainless steel barrier between us. "You threw me away, Damon," I hissed, my chest heaving. The smell of spilled coffee was acrid and bitter, mixing with the intoxicating, confusing scent of his cedar and rain. "You stood in front of the entire pack and told them I wasn't worth the air I breathed. You don't get to come here 5 years later and ask me why." Damon looked as if I had slapped him. His face, usually a mask of alpha stoicism, cracked. Pain, raw and undeniable, flashed in his eyes. He took a step toward me, his hand reaching out, palm up. "Elara, Bang! The swinging doors to the kitchen flew open, hitting the wall with a resounding crash. "Mommy, look!" The shout was filled with pure, unadulterated joy. Leo ran into the front of the shop, completely oblivious to the thick, suffocating tension that was choking the room. He was holding his tablet high above his head, the screen glowing blue. "I fixed the truck in the game. I made it stronger so it won't break." My heart didn't just stop. It plummeted into my stomach. "Leo, no!" I gasped, lunging forward to intercept him. But I was too slow. Leo skidded to a halt in the middle of the floor. He looked at the spilled coffee. He looked at my pale, terrified face. And then he looked at the giant man in the charcoal suit, standing frozen near the counter. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the room until my lungs burned. Damon turned slowly. He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed entirely on the boy. Leo didn't cower. He didn't run. He stood there in his faded jeans and superhero t-shirt, clutching his tablet to his chest. He tilted his head to the side, his messy black hair falling over his forehead. Damon tilted his head to the side in the exact same motion. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. The resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't just the black hair or the structure of the jaw. It was the stance. They both stood with their feet shoulder-width apart, grounded and immovable. They both held their chins high, an innate, biological display of dominance that no 5-year-old should possess. And the eyes. Damon took off his sunglasses completely, letting them drop to the floor with a clatter. He stared into eyes that were the exact same shape as his own. My breath caught in my throat, a ragged sob threatening to escape. I had spent 5 years praying this moment would never happen. I had spent 5 years hiding, running, lying, and now, in the span of a heartbeat, it was all unraveling. Damon moved. He didn't lunge. He didn't attack. He moved with a slow reverence that was almost terrifying. He sank down onto one knee, ignoring the puddle of cold coffee soaking into his expensive suit trousers. By kneeling, he brought himself to eye level with Leo. The Alpha King, the most feared wolf on the continent, was kneeling before a child. "Hello," Damon whispered. His voice was unrecognizable, stripped of all command, left raw and wondering. Leo blinked. He took a cautious step forward, drawn in by the magnetic pull of the blood connection. He sniffed the air, his small nose twitching. "You smell like the woods," Leo said, his voice high and clear. Like big trees." "And you," Damon said, his eyes scanning Leo's face, cataloging every feature. "You smell like milk and vanilla." But underneath, Damon reached out a hand. He didn't touch Leo. He just held his hand out, palm open, an invitation. "What is your name, pup?" "Leo," my son answered instantly. "Leo," Damon repeated. He closed his eyes for a second, as if the name was a prayer. When he opened them, the wonder was beginning to fade, replaced by a dawn of realization that was sharp and dangerous. He looked up at me. From his kneeling position, he looked even more dangerous. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating gaze of the alpha. His jaw tightened, the muscles ticking as he clenched his teeth. "Ilara," he said softly. The name carried a weight that made my knees tremble. "He is an alpha. I can feel the heat coming off him from here. He's just a strong boy," I stammered, backing up until I hit the wall. "He has a high metabolism." Damon stood up. He rose slowly, unfolding his massive frame until he towered over both of us again. The atmosphere in the room shifted from shock to hostility. The smell of rain turned into the smell of a brewing hurricane. Ozone and electricity. "He has my eyes," Damon said. "He has my jaw. He has my scent." He took a step toward me. "Who is the father?" The question was a command. It hit my wolf like a physical blow, demanding the truth. My throat constricted, my instincts screaming at me to submit, to bare my neck and tell him everything. No, if I tell him, he takes Leo. If he takes Leo, Vanessa kills him. I dug my fingernails into my palms until the skin broke. The sharp pain gave me a moment of clarity, enough to fight the alpha command. A human man, I lied, my voice shaking but audible. His name was Mark. I met him after I left the pack. Damon's eyes narrowed into slits. A human? Yes, I insisted, desperate now. He died before Leo was born. A car accident. A human father produced an alpha child? Damon asked, his voice dropping an octave, becoming a low, threatening rumble. A human father gave him eyes that looked like gold in the sunlight? It happens, I cried. Genetics are strange. He's not yours, Damon. You rejected me. You severed the bond. You can't have a child with a mate you rejected. It was a weak argument, and we both knew it. Biology didn't care about rejection ceremonies. Damon stared at me. He looked deep into my eyes, searching for the truth, searching for the woman who had once looked at him with adoration. He stepped closer, invading my personal space until his chest was inches from mine. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. The heat of his body was overwhelming, branding me. I can hear your heart, Elara, he whispered. It's beating like a hummingbird's wings. It skips a beat every time you open your mouth. He pulled back, his face inches from mine. His lips curled into a snarl, revealing the tips of his elongated canines. Liar. The word liar hung in the air, vibrating with a guttural growl that made the glass of the display case rattle. Before I could blink, Damon's hand shot out. He didn't grab me this time. He grabbed the phone on the wall, the landline I used for orders, and ripped the cord out of the socket with a violent jerk. Leo! I gasped, instinctively moving to shield my son with my body. Don't touch him! Damon looked at me, his chest heaving with suppressed rage. The gold in his eyes was swirling, a chaotic storm of betrayal and possessiveness. I am not going to hurt him, Damon snarled, though his voice was tight with the effort of holding back his wolf. But I am done playing games. You are coming with me. I'm not going anywhere with you, I said, backing toward the rear exit, pushing Leo behind me. Get out of my shop. Damon laughed. It was a dark, terrifying sound. Your shop? Elara, do you think you have a choice? You are a wolf of the Silver Moon Pack. You are a registered member who faked her own death. Under pack law, that is treason. I am a rogue, I screamed. I crossed the river. I have no pack. You never formally severed ties, he countered, stepping closer, cornering us. There was no ceremony of departure. In the eyes of the council, you are a missing subject. And this, he gestured to Leo, his eyes softening momentarily before hardening again. This boy is an unregistered wolf living in human territory. That is a violation of the treaty. He was using the law. He was using his authority as king to cover the fact that he was simply a desperate, furious male who wanted his mate and child. We are leaving, he commanded. Now. No, I whispered. Damon didn't argue. He moved with a speed that was impossible for a human eye to track. In 1 second, he was 5 feet away. In the next, he was directly in front of me. He swept Leo up into his arms. Hey! Leo shouted, kicking his legs. Put me down! Leo! I lunged for him, but Damon easily blocked me with his shoulder. He held Leo securely against his chest. Awkwardly, but securely. If you want him, Damon said, his voice cold and final, you will follow me to the car. If you try to run, I will have my Gamma track you down, and I will take custody of the boy by force. Do not test me, Alara. I have lost 5 years. I will not lose another minute." He turned and marched out of the bakery, carrying my son into the rain. I stood there for a split second, paralyzed by horror. Then, grabbing my coat, I ran after them. The rain was torrential now. It soaked me to the bone the moment I stepped outside. Damon was already at the curb. A massive black SUV, an Escalade with tinted windows and reinforced armor, was idling there. He opened the back door and deposited Leo into the leather seat. "Get in," he ordered, looking at me over the roof of the car. Rainwater dripped from his hair, running down the sharp planes of his face. He looked like a god of storms. I hesitated. Getting in that car meant going back. It meant facing Vanessa. It meant entering the lion's den. "Alara," he warned, his hand on the door handle. "Get in." I climbed into the back seat. The door slammed shut, locking instantly with a heavy, mechanical click. The silence inside the car was immediate and oppressive. The outside world, the rain, the city, my freedom, was cut off. The interior smelled of expensive leather, conditioned air, and him. His scent was everywhere, embedded in the upholstery. It was suffocating. Damon climbed into the driver's seat. He didn't look back. He put the car in gear and peeled away from the curb, merging aggressively into traffic. I scooted to the far side of the seat, pulling Leo into my lap. I wrapped my arms around him, burying my face in his damp hair. "Mom," Leo whispered, his voice small. "Is he a bad guy?" I looked at the back of Damon's head. I saw his eyes watching us in the rearview mirror. "I don't know, baby," I whispered back. "I'm not a bad guy, Leo," Damon said from the front, his voice surprisingly steady. "I'm the alpha." "What's an alpha?" Leo asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "It means I'm the boss," Damon said. "It means I protect the pack." "Do you protect my mom?" Leo asked. Damon's hands tightened on the steering wheel until the leather creaked. The silence stretched, thick and painful. "I tried to," Damon said quietly, "and I failed." He didn't speak again for the rest of the drive. The city lights faded, replaced by the dark, looming shapes of the forest. We were heading north, toward the mountains, toward the Silver Moon territory. My anxiety spiked with every mile marker. My stomach churned. I felt nauseous, the old rejection sickness echoing in my body. We were leaving the human world. We were entering a world where strength was law and weakness was death. After an hour of tense silence, the car slowed. We turned onto a private gravel road. Massive iron gates swung open automatically as the car approached. We wound our way up the mountain, and then, through the trees, I saw it, the pack house. It was more of a castle than a house, a sprawling structure of gray stone and timber built into the side of the cliff. It looked exactly as I remembered it, imposing, ancient, and cold. Damon parked the SUV in the circular driveway. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a thick, freezing mist. "We're here," he said. The locks clicked open. Damon got out and opened my door. He didn't offer me his hand this time. He stood back, waiting. I climbed out, my legs shaking. Leo slid out after me, gripping my hand tight. He looked up at the massive castle, his eyes wide. "Whoa," he breathed. "It's huge." The front doors of the pack house opened. My blood ran cold. Standing at the top of the stone steps, under the yellow glow of the porch lights, was a woman. She was tall, with sleek blonde hair, and a body that was sharp at angles and curves. She wore a silk dress that looked out of place in the cold mountain air. Vanessa. She wasn't the Luna. Not officially, as Damon hadn't marked her, but she carried herself like one. She was the one who ruled the domestic affairs of the pack. She was the one who had made my life a living hell before I ran. She smiled as she saw Damon, descending the steps with graceful, predatory movements. "Damon," she purred, "you're back early. Did you find the—" She stopped. She was 10 feet away when she saw me. Her smile faltered. Her eyes widened in genuine shock. "Alara?" she gasped. "But you're dead." Then her gaze dropped. She looked at Leo. She looked at the messy black hair. She looked at the amber eyes. She looked at the boy who was a carbon copy of the man she wanted to marry. The shock on her face vanished, replaced instantly by a twist of pure, venomous hatred. Her nostrils flared. She smelled the truth. She smelled the alpha blood. "Who is this?" she hissed, her voice sounding like a viper striking. Damon stepped forward, placing his body partially between Vanessa and us. But he didn't answer her. He just looked at me, his face unreadable. Vanessa took another step, her eyes locked on Leo. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "Does this half-breed brat have your face, Damon?" The guest room was a cage, wrapped in velvet and silk. It was situated in the east wing of the pack house, a suite larger than my entire apartment back in the city. The walls were paneled in dark mahogany, the floors covered in plush Persian rugs that swallowed the sound of footsteps. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting long, dancing shadows against the high ceiling. It should have been comforting. It should have been warm. But to me, it smelled like a prison. The air was thick with the scent of alpha. Not just Damon's specific cedar and rain, but the collective, heavy musk of centuries of dominance that had seeped into the very stones of this castle. It was a pressure that sat on my chest, making every breath a conscious effort. "Mom, my skin itches." Leo was pacing the room like a caged animal. He had been agitated since we crossed the threshold of the territory. The latent magic of the packlands was reacting to him, and he to it. His small hands were balling into fists. Unclench, ball, unclench. "I know, baby," I said, sitting on the edge of the massive four-poster bed. I kept my voice low, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "Come here. Let me put some lotion on." "It's not that kind of itch," he grumbled, kicking at the leg of a heavy oak table. The wood groaned under the impact of his small sneaker. "It feels like bees buzzing under my skin. It's loud here, Mom. The air is loud." My heart broke for him. He was feeling the pack link, the telepathic web that connected all members. Since he wasn't marked or initiated, it was just white noise to him, a static interference that was making his wolf restless. "We won't be here long," I promised, a lie tasting like ash on my tongue. "Just until the doctor comes back." They had taken the blood sample an hour ago. Der Eris, a man I remembered from my youth as kind but spineless, had done it himself. He had looked at Leo with wide, fearful eyes, his hands shaking as he filled the vials. He hadn't said a word, just hurried out to the lab. Now, we waited. I stood up and went to the window. The glass was reinforced, thick and cold against my forehead. Outside, the mist was swirling around the castle turrets. I could see the patrol guards moving in the courtyard below, their flashlights cutting through the fog. We were locked in. A knock at the door made me jump. Leo stopped pacing. He let out a low, vibrating growl, moving instantly to stand in front of me. "Leo, no," I whispered, pulling him back. "Sit on the bed." The heavy wooden door creaked open. Damon stepped inside. He had changed out of his ruined suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a black t-shirt that clung to his chest, revealing the thick cords of muscle in his arms. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his golden eyes, and the stubble on his jaw seemed darker, rougher. But the power radiating off him was undiminished. It rolled into the room like a heat wave, instantly clashing with the nervous energy Leo was emitting. The air between them actually crackled, a dry, static popping sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. Damon didn't look at Leo. He looked straight at me. "The results will be ready in 10 minutes, he said. His voice was hoarse. "Why are you here, Damon?" I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. I used the barrier to hide the fact that my hands were trembling. "Shouldn't you be with Vanessa? I'm sure she has questions about why you dragged a dead rogue and her child into the family wing." Damon flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of the muscles around his eyes, but I saw it. "Vanessa has been confined to her quarters," he said stiffly. "She has no authority over what I do." He took a step into the room. He closed the door behind him, sealing us in. "I brought food," he said, gesturing vaguely to the hallway where a cart presumably waited. "For the boy. He must be hungry." "His name is Leo," I snapped. The anger, which I had been suppressing with fear for the last 5 hours, suddenly found a crack in the dam. It began to leak out, hot and toxic. "And he doesn't want your food. He wants to go home." "This is his home," Damon said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, rumbling register. "If he is my blood, this is his birthright." "Birthright?" I laughed, a shrill, hysterical sound that bounced off the mahogany walls. "You talk about birthright? You!" I stepped away from the window, walking toward him. My wolf was snarling in my head. But for once, she wasn't submitting. She was furious. She was a mother whose pup was threatened. 5 years ago, you stood on the mating dais and told the world I was genetic trash. I spat the words at him. "Do you remember the exact words, Damon? Because I do. I have replayed them every single night." Damon's jaw clenched. "Ilara, I was young. I was under pressure from the council." "You said I had weak blood," I interrupted him, taking another step. "You said I would pollute your line. You said I wasn't strong enough to carry an alpha's child." I pointed a shaking finger at Leo, who was watching us with wide, terrified eyes from the bed. "Look at him," I screamed. "Does he look weak to you? Does he look like pollution?" Damon looked at the boy. Pain, raw and unguarded, flashed across his face. "No, he looks magnificent. He is magnificent," I cried, tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging. "And I raised him. Me, the weak Omega. I birthed him alone in a cabin with no power and no heat. I cut the cord myself. I nursed him while I worked double shifts at a bakery. I taught him to control a wolf that is stronger than most adult males. I did that, not you." The air in the room was suffocating now. The static electricity was intense. Sparks were literally jumping from the fireplace, snapping in the air. "I didn't know," Damon whispered. He reached out a hand toward me, his fingers trembling. "Alara, please. I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to look." I slapped his hand away. The skin-on-skin contact sent a jolt of agony through me. The bond, trying to reattach, trying to heal the severance. I recoiled. "You didn't look at me that night. You looked through me. You saw a rank, not a person. You saw a liability." "I see you now," he rasped, stepping closer, ignoring the voltage in the air. "I see you, Alara. You are burning. You are the most powerful thing in this room." "Don't you dare!" I hissed, backing up until my legs hit the bed. "Don't you dare try to charm me. You killed the girl who loved you. You drowned her in the river." Damon looked like I had stabbed him. He went pale, his golden eyes shimmering with moisture. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself, but the words died in his throat. From the corner of the bed, a soft sound broke the tension. Leo was crying. He wasn't sobbing loudly. He was making a soft, high-pitched whining sound, the sound of a distressed pup. He had his hands over his ears, rocking back and forth. "Stop it," Leo whimpered. "Stop the noise. It hurts." The anger drained out of me instantly, replaced by maternal panic. I turned to him, gathering him into my arms. "Shh, Leo. It's okay. Mommy's here." "The air hurts," Leo cried, burying his face in my neck. I looked back at Damon with pure hatred. "Your aura. You're hurting him. You're too strong. Dampen it." Damon looked horrified. He immediately took a step back, closing his eyes, physically forcing his dominance down. The oppressive weight in the room lifted slightly, the static fading. "I'm sorry," Damon whispered, looking at his son with a mixture of longing and terror. "I didn't mean to." The door opened without a knock. We all froze. Dr. Eris stood in the doorway. He was an older wolf, gray-haired and usually composed. But right now, he looked as if he had seen a ghost. His face was devoid of color, his skin pasty and clammy. He held a tablet in his hands, his knuckles white. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Damon. "Alpha," Eris said, his voice trembling so badly, the words stuttered. "The results, Eris," Damon commanded, though his voice was subdued. "Is he mine?" Dr. Eris walked into the room, his legs stiff. He extended the tablet toward Damon. It is not just a match, Alpha," Eris whispered. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Leo stopped crying to listen. "The DNA markers," Eris continued, swallowing hard. "They are unprecedented. A 99.9% match to your lineage. Yes, but there is something else." Damon took the tablet. He looked at the screen. His eyes widened, pupils blowing wide until the gold was swallowed by black. "What is this?" Damon breathed. "These levels, it is the ancient blood," Dr. Eris said, falling to his knees. He bowed his head toward Leo, who was peeking out from my shoulder. "The prophecies spoke of a child born of a rejected bond, a child whose wolf would be strong enough to unite the Pharaoh lands. Alpha, he isn't just your son." Dr. Eris looked up, awe and fear warring in his eyes. "He is the Fenrir," Eris whispered, "the prophesied Alpha King. His wolf will be stronger than yours, stronger than any of us." Damon stared at the screen. Then slowly, terrifyingly, he lifted his gaze to Leo. The look on his face wasn't just fatherly pride anymore. It was the look of a man realizing he was standing in the presence of a god. The silence that followed Eris's proclamation was heavier than the stone walls of the castle. Fenrir, the Wolf Eater, the king of kings. It was a myth, a bedtime story told to pups about a wolf born with pure, primal magic who would one day end the wars between the packs. And apparently, he was currently sniffling into my t-shirt and asking for a juice box. Damon lowered the tablet. His hand was shaking. The arrogant, composed king was gone. In his place was a man who looked like the ground had just dissolved beneath his feet. He looked at me. For the first time since we met 5 years ago, there was no calculation in his eyes. No judgment, no lust. There was only fear and a crushing, suffocating guilt. "Leave us," Damon whispered to the doctor. "But Alpha, the council needs to keep—" "Get out!" Damon roared. The sound was so loud, it rattled the window panes. Dr. Eris scrambled backward, practically falling into the hallway, and slammed the door shut. We were alone again. Damon didn't move toward us. He stayed near the door, as if he didn't feel worthy to approach. He stared at Leo, then at me, his chest heaving. "You knew," he said softly. "You knew he was strong." "I knew he was different," I answered, my voice steady, despite the chaos in my mind. "I didn't know about prophecies. I just knew he broke things. I knew he growled in his sleep." Damon let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He ran a hand through his dark hair, gripping the roots. "I rejected you," he murmured, speaking to himself. "I rejected the mother of the Fenrir. I cast out the strongest wolf born to this pack in 1,000 years." He looked at me, and his eyes were swimming with tears. I had never seen an alpha cry. It was against their biology. They were built for patir, for stoicism. But a single tear tracked through the stubble on Damon's cheek. "Elara," he choked out. He moved then. But he didn't stalk. He didn't loom. He crossed the room and dropped to his knees, 3 feet away from the bed. He didn't bow his head like a subject. He looked up at me, exposing his throat, the ultimate sign of submission. He placed his hands on his thighs, palms open. "I am begging you," he said. His voice was cracked, broken. "I am begging you to forgive me." I stared down at him. A part of me, the Omega part, wanted to weep. It wanted to slide off the bed, crawl into his lap, and lick the tears from his face. It wanted to fix him. But the woman I had become, the mother, she was made of ice. "Forgiveness?" I asked coldly. "You think an apology fixes this? You think because he's special, suddenly I matter?" "No." Damon shook his head frantically. "No, Elara. You matter because you are you. I felt it today, in the bakery, before I knew who you were. My soul knew. It tried to reach for you." "Your soul is a little late," I said, shifting Leo so he was on my hip, shielding him. 5 years late. "I was a fool," Damon pleaded. "I was arrogant. I thought rank was everything. But these last 5 years, I have been hollow. I have a crown, but I sleep in a cold bed. I have power, but I have no peace. The bond, it never fully broke for me either. It has been a wound that bleeds every day." He shuffled forward on his knees, reaching out a hand toward Leo's foot, but stopping inches away, afraid to touch. "Let me know him," Damon whispered. "Please, let me be his father. Let me protect him, If he is the Fenrir, he will have enemies. The whole world will want him. You cannot protect him alone, Alara. You know that. That hit home. The truth of it pierced my armor. He was right. If the news got out, and Dr. Eris would talk, every rogue, every rival alpha, every power-hungry wolf would come for Leo. But looking at Damon, kneeling on the Persian rug, I didn't see safety. I saw the source of all my pain. I protected him from you, I said, my voice trembling. And I will protect him from the world. I stood up. Damon flinched back, looking up at me with wide, desperate eyes. Get up, I said, looking down at him with disgust. You look pathetic. Damon stood slowly, his movements heavy. I am taking my son, I said, clutching Leo tight. And I am leaving. If you try to stop me, I will scream. I will let every wolf in this castle know that their alpha is holding a woman and child hostage. I will cause a scene that will shatter your precious reputation forever. Alara, you can't leave, Damon said, panic rising in his voice. It's night. The mist is thick. It's not safe. It's safer out there than in here with you, I retorted. I walked past him. I expected him to grab me. I expected him to use his alpha command to force me to stay. I braced myself for the weight of his voice. But he did nothing. He stood there, head bowed, defeated. He let me walk to the door. I will fix this, he whispered as I put my hand on the latch. I will spend the rest of my life making this right, Alara. I swear it on the moon. I didn't look back. You don't have a life with us, Damon. You rejected it. I opened the door. A cold draft from the hallway hit me, smelling of stone and old dust. It chilled the sweat on my neck. I stepped out, carrying the future king in my arms, and walked away from his father. The hallway was empty. The castle was quiet, strangely so. I hurried toward the main entrance, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the stone floors. Leo had fallen silent, his head resting on my shoulder, exhausted by the emotional turmoil. I reached the heavy oak front doors. I pushed them open with my shoulder and stepped out into the night. The mist had cleared slightly, but the air was freezing. The courtyard was dimly lit by the yellow perimeter lights. Mom, Leo mumbled, where are we going? To the car, baby. We're going to find a taxi. We're going home. I walked briskly toward the main gates. The guards stationed there, 2 young betas, looked at me with confusion. They hadn't been given orders to stop me. Damon hadn't raised the alarm. They stepped aside, letting the rejected Omega pass. I walked through the iron gates and onto the gravel road that led down the mountain. The silence of the forest was absolute. No crickets, no wind. My skin prickled. Danger. The warning didn't come from my head. It came from Leo. He sat up abruptly in my arms, his small body going rigid as a board. Mom, he whispered, something smells like garbage, rot. The scent hit me a second later. The unmistakable, rancid stench of unwashed bodies and decaying meat. Rogues. Not just one, dozens. A twig snapped to my left. I spun around, clutching Leo. From the shadows of the tree line, eyes appeared. Yellow eyes, green eyes, mad, hungry eyes. Wolves, gaunt, scarred, and feral. They weren't shifting. They were already in their beast forms, slinking out of the darkness like oil. There were too many of them, and standing behind them, hidden in the shadows of a large pine tree, was a human figure. The scent of expensive perfume cut through the rot. Vanessa. I saw the glint of her blonde hair in the moonlight. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Leo. She raised a hand and pointed a manicured finger directly at my son. "Kill the bastard!" she screeched. The rogues lunged. Chaos erupted. The first wolf, a mangy brown male, sprang at us, jaws snapping. I screamed, turning my back to shield Leo, bracing for the teeth to sink into my flesh. A roar shattered the night. It wasn't a human scream. It was the roar of a monster. It came from Leo. My 5-year-old son didn't cower. He pushed out of my arms, landing on the gravel with a thud that shook the ground. His eyes were glowing a blinding, supernova gold. "No!" Leo shouted. He threw his hand out. A shock wave of pure, golden energy, the ancient magic, exploded from his small palm. It hit the mid-air rogue like a cannonball, blasting the 1,000-pound wolf backward into the trees with the sound of shattering bone. But there were 20 more coming. "Damon!" I screamed, my voice tearing my throat apart. "Damon!" My scream tore through the freezing night air, raw and desperate. It echoed off the castle walls, a plea to a man I had sworn to hate, but whom my soul was screaming for. The blast of golden energy that had erupted from Leo's small hand faded, leaving a ringing silence that lasted only a heartbeat. The rogue wolf he had struck lay motionless in the trees, smoke rising from its fur. "But Leo, my baby," he crumpled. The burst of ancient magic was too much for his small, untrained body. His knees gave out, and he collapsed onto the sharp gravel, his face pale, and his breathing shallow. "Leo!" I scrambled toward him, throwing my body over his. I was an Omega. I had no claws to fight with, no strength to match the monsters circling us. All I had was my flesh and bone to offer as a shield. "Get the boy!" Vanessa shrieked from the shadows. "Before the pack arrives!" The rogues, recovering from the shock of the magic, snarled. The scent of rot and garbage intensified, choking me. They realized the child was down. They realized the threat was gone. 3 of them lunged at once. I squeezed my eyes shut, curling around Leo, waiting for the teeth. I could smell their rancid breath. I could feel the heat of their bodies closing in. "I love you, Leo. I love you." And then the world exploded. A massive black blur launched itself from the castle steps. It didn't touch the ground. It was a projectile of pure, lethal fury. Roar. The sound wasn't human, and it wasn't just a wolf. It was the sound of the earth splitting open. It vibrated in my teeth, in the marrow of my bones. Damon landed directly on top of the lead rogue. There was a sickening crunch, wet and final, as the rogue's spine shattered under the impact of the Alpha King. Damon had shifted. He was magnificent and terrifying. His wolf form was easily twice the size of the rogue's, a hulking beast of midnight fur and muscle. His lips were pulled back to reveal fangs the size of daggers, and his eyes were burning pools of molten gold, glowing with a rage that promised extinction. He didn't just fight, he slaughtered. He whipped his head around, snapping the neck of a second rogue with a brutal twist. He swiped his massive paw, his claws tearing through flank and muscle, sending a third wolf flying into the iron gates. "Dad," Leo whispered beneath me, his eyes fluttering open. He was watching the monster, Not with fear, but with awe. Damon stood over us, a living fortress. He let out a low, vibrating growl that shook the gravel beneath my cheek. He was daring them. "Come closer. I dare you." The remaining rogues hesitated. They were hired guns, feral and starving. But they weren't stupid. This was the Alpha King. This was death incarnate. Vanessa saw their hesitation. She stepped out from the pine tree, her face twisted into a mask of insanity. She held something in her hand, a long, silver dagger that glinted with a sickly, greenish liquid. "Useless curs!" she screamed. She looked at the rogue nearest to her, a scarred, gray beta. "Distract him, or I don't pay you!" The gray rogue howled and lunged, not at Damon, but feinting to the left, trying to circle behind him to get to me. Damon roared and turned to intercept, his jaws snapping. It was a trap. The moment Damon turned, another rogue, small, fast, and silent, shot out from the darkness directly at Leo. He wasn't trying to bite. He was holding a blade in his human hand, mid-shift. Time slowed down. I saw the blade arcing down. I saw the green liquid dripping from the tip. Wolfsbane. Concentrated, liquid death. I tried to move, to cover Leo, but my limbs were frozen with terror. "No!" Damon didn't turn around. He didn't have time to bite or claw. He did the only thing he could. He threw his body backward. He placed his massive, furry torso directly in the path of the blade meant for his son's heart. Thwack! The sound was dull and wet. The blade buried itself deep into Damon's shoulder, close to the neck. Damon didn't roar this time. He let out a sharp, high-pitched yelp, a sound that shattered my heart into a million pieces. The rogue released the handle and scrambled back, terrified by what he had done. Damon stumbled. The great black wolf swayed. The scent of cedar and rain was instantly overpowered by the smell of burning flesh and copper. Bright, arterial blood sprayed onto the white snow patches on the grass. It was too red, too fast. Damon turned his head, looking at Leo. His golden eyes were already dimming, glazing over with a milky film. He snarled one last defiance at the rogues, but his legs gave out. He collapsed. A shimmer of light distorted the air around him as the forced shift took hold. Bones cracked and reshaped, fur retracting into skin. Within seconds, the massive wolf was gone, and Damon lay naked and bleeding on the cold gravel. The dagger was still sticking out of his shoulder. The skin around the wound was turning black, the veins radiating out like a spider web of necrosis. "Damon!" I screamed, crawling over to him. I ignored the rogues, who were now fleeing as the sounds of the approaching pack patrols filled the air. I ignored Vanessa, who was running into the woods. I pulled Damon's head into my lap. His skin was burning hot, but he was shivering violently. "Elara!" he gasped. A bubble of blood formed on his lips. The boy, he's safe," I sobbed, pressing my hands around the wound, trying to staunch the flow. But the blood was dark and oily. The wolfsbane was already in his heart. "You saved him. You saved him, Damon." Leo crawled over, tears streaming down his face. He grabbed Damon's large, limp hand with his two small ones. Dad, get up." Damon turned his head weakly toward Leo. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My son," he whispered, the life rattling in his chest. "My heir." He looked at me one last time. His golden eyes were dull, the light fading like a dying ember. Love, he didn't finish. His chest hitched once and then stopped. His head lolled back against my thighs. The king was dead. Silence fell over the mountain. The rogues were gone. The patrols were swarming through the gates, shouting orders, but to me, the world was silent. I stared down at Damon's face. He looked peaceful, younger, stripped of the burden of the crown. "No," I whispered. The denial started low in my belly and clawed its way up. "No, I do not accept this." "Mom," Leo cried, shaking Damon's arm. "Fix him! You fix everything! Fix him!" The words triggered something deep inside my lineage. I was an Omega. For centuries, Omegas were told we were weak. We were told we were subservient because we lacked the physical strength for war. But we were not weak. We were the hearth. We were the bind. We were the life. I looked at the black veins spreading up Damon's neck. The wolfsbane was a poison of severance. It cut the soul from the body. But I was his mate. Even rejected, even denied, the bond had never truly died. It was a thread, frayed and thin, but still there. I placed my hands directly over Damon's heart. "Leo," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, distorted, layered, ancient. "Put your hand on mine." Leo sniffled and obeyed, placing his small, warm hand over my blood-stained fingers. I closed my eyes. I didn't reach for magic. I didn't know any spells. I reached for him. I reached for the scent of cedar and rain. I reached for the memory of the way his eyes looked when he realized Leo was his. I reached for the pain of the last 5 years and the love that had survived beneath it. "Come back," I commanded silently. "I did not survive the river for you to die in the dirt." A warmth started in my chest. It wasn't the burning heat of alpha aggression. It was the soft, relentless warmth of a sunrise. It flowed down my arms, through my palms, and into Damon's cold chest. Gasps erupted from the gathering crowd of wolves around us. I opened my eyes. A blinding, golden light was pouring from my hands. It wasn't just light. It was liquid energy. It pulsed in time with my own heartbeat. The light wrapped around the wound on Damon's shoulder. I watched, mesmerized, as the black veins began to recede. The silver dagger was pushed out of his flesh by the knitting muscle, clattering onto the stones. The skin turned from gray to pink, but he wasn't breathing yet. I leaned down. I pressed my forehead against his. "Damon," I whispered into his mind. "I forgive you. Come back to us." Snap. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard, though no one else heard it. It was the sound of the rubber band, the one that had snapped 5 years ago, fusing back together. But this time, it wasn't a rubber band. It was a chain of iron and gold. Indestructible. The bond flooded me. I felt him. I felt his confusion, his pain, and then his overwhelming, tidal wave of love. Damon gasped. His back arched off the ground as air rushed into his lungs. His eyes flew open. They weren't just gold. They were blazing with the same light that had come from my hands. "Elara!" he choked out, his voice strong, alive. I collapsed onto his chest, sobbing with relief. He wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my neck, inhaling my scent like it was oxygen. You came back, I wept. You called me, he rasped, holding me so tight it hurt. I heard you in the dark. Alpha! The shout came from Dr. Eris. The pack had formed a circle around us. Hundreds of wolves, fighters, elders, mothers were watching. They had seen the golden light. They had seen the Omega bring the dead king back. Damon sat up, keeping one arm firmly around my waist and the other pulling Leo into his lap. He looked at his pack. He looked at the blood on the ground. Then he stood up, lifting us both with him. He didn't care that he was naked. The shadows and his aura cloaked him in power. Where is she? Damon demanded, his voice booming like thunder. Two guards dragged a screaming, thrashing figure from the edge of the woods. Vanessa. She was covered in mud, her silk dress torn. They threw her at Damon's feet. He was dead, she shrieked, looking at Damon with madness in her eyes. I killed you. You should be dead. Damon looked down at her. There was no pity in his eyes, only ice. You tried to kill my son, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You tried to kill my mate. She is a reject, Vanessa spat at me. She is nothing. She is everything, Damon roared. The Alpha Command flattened the grass for 50 yards. Every wolf in the vicinity dropped to one knee in submission. Even Vanessa was forced down, choking on the pressure. Damon turned to the pack. He grabbed my hand and raised it high. I, Damon Blackwood, Alpha of the Silver Moon, hereby revoke my rejection of Alara Vance. The air shimmered. The mark on my neck, the invisible scar, burned hot and then cooled, replaced by the soothing, permanent weight of the completed mark. She is my true mate, Damon announced, his voice ringing through the mountains. She is the savior of your king, and she is your queen. He looked down at Leo, who was clinging to his leg. Damon placed his heavy hand on the boy's head. And this, Damon said, his voice thick with pride, is Leo Blackwood, my son, the Fenrir, the heir to the throne. A silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then Dr. Eris bowed his head until it touched the dirt. Long live the Alpha. Long live the Luna. Long live the Prince. Long live! The pack chanted, the sound rising into a deafening roar. Damon looked at Vanessa, who was trembling on the ground. I will not kill you, he said coldly. Death is too easy. You are banished. If your scent is ever found on these lands again, you will be hunted for sport. He turned his back on her. Get her out of my sight. The balcony of the Alpha Suite overlooked the entire valley. The storm had passed, leaving the sky scrubbed clean and filled with stars. The moon was full and bright, silvering the tops of the pine trees. I leaned against the stone railing, wrapped in one of Damon's oversized shirts. The smell of cedar and rain was everywhere now. It wasn't suffocating anymore. It was home. The glass door opened. Damon stepped out. He was fresh from the shower, his hair damp, wearing only sweatpants. He came up behind me, wrapping his massive arms around my waist, pulling me back against his solid chest. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, kissing the spot where his mark now glowed faintly. Is he asleep? I whispered. Out cold, Damon murmured against my skin. Using that much magic exhausted him. He's snoring. It's adorable. I smiled, leaning my head back against his shoulder. He gets that from you. Damon chuckled, the sound vibrating through me. He turned me around in his arms, so I was facing him. His golden eyes searched mine, filled with a tenderness that still took my breath away. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His hand lingered on my cheek. "I almost lost you," he whispered, the fear returning to his eyes for a fleeting second. "Twice." "You didn't," I said softly, covering his hand with mine. "We're here. We're safe." "I missed 5 years," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I missed his first steps. I missed his first word. I missed holding you at night." He leaned his forehead against mine. "I will spend every day making up for it," he vowed, his voice fierce. "I will spend every hour of every day worshiping you, Alara. I will make sure you never feel unwanted or unsafe ever again. Just promise me one thing," I whispered. "Anything. Name it, and it's yours. Promise me you'll never buy him another monster truck." I laughed softly. "He breaks them too fast." Damon smiled, a genuine, heart-stopping smile that reached his eyes. "Deal," he whispered. He leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't a desperate kiss, or a hungry one. It was a promise. It tasted of jasmine, honey, cedar, and rain. It tasted like forever. Below us, the pack howled at the moon, celebrating the return of their king and the rise of their queen. But up here, in the circle of his arms, there was only peace.